Anyone who believes in indefinite growth on a physically finite planet is either mad or an economist.
We don't want to focus politics on a notion that involves the rejection of principles around which a large majority of our fellow citizens organize their lives.
We are not as endlessly manipulable and as predictable as you would think.
Do you know that the BBC website is accessed by 20 million people 5 times a day? For many people nowadays, the last thing you see when you go to bed is the news headlines, and the first thing you see is the news headlines. I mean, what is this thing that we're constantly brought into contact with? Back in the 18th century, people thought that news, information, if only it could be made freely available, would be an enlightening force and would free people and liberate nations and bring the light of reason where there previously been darkness. So huge claims are made in the 18th century for free information. But there's a weird thing about free information nowadays. If I said to most of you, okay, what was in the news last week? Right, most of you, I think, wouldn't know. And the reason is that there's so much of it, and it flows over us. If you want to keep a population supine, addicted to the status quo, unable to grasp their sense of what is possible and what could be changed, you've got 2 options. One, censor the news completely, North Korean option. The other option is the option we're practicing here. Flood people with news. Give them so much news, they don't know what on earth is going on. And then you can say, well, your free information is free. I think that news has in many ways replaced religion, which used to be the place that you went to find out what was right and wrong, what mattered, the meaning of life. Religion was the guiding force. And the philosopher Hegel says a nation becomes modern when it shifts its allegiance from the church to the news. That's happened in this country very much so. It's not just that we look at the news at the same times often as in the Catholic liturgy we would go and check in with prayers to God. It's that we look to news as a system of authority, and it shapes our understanding of reality to an extraordinary degree. A very simple proof of that is if you're trying to plan a revolution, where do you take the tanks first? Always the news station. There used to be this assumption that the news is about the important stuff. And because we live in democracies, the important stuff becomes popular. That's the idea. And then when it becomes popular, politicians who are elected by popular mandate can take action. That's the way that it should work. Information, popularity, and political change. Weird thing has happened nowadays. There are certain things that are really, really important, like this kind of thing, but then it's not very popular at all. If you put this on your front page, no one's going to click on it. So a division has opened up between Taylor Swift's legs and Arctic melt, and we don't know how to heal it. There's been a tremendous divergence. The architecture of news has broken down. What do we do about this? Well, right-thinking, intelligent people panic, and they say we are living in an age of barbarity where celebrity news wins out and people are only interested in cute babes. That's the view. Now, I'm not so pessimistic because the era of cute babes has been with us for a long time. This is Bellini. Now, if you just want to try and teach people about the meaning of life through very bearded chaps with huge books, you're not going to get very far. And the Catholic Church knew this, and that's why it commissioned Bellini to make some Taylor Swifts of the day, who looked very, very beguiling, and they helped to sugar the pill of important knowledge. We have to recognize that you're dealing with a news audience that responds very well to certain issues and doesn't to others. And I think that so often news journalists are primed to think if an issue is important, if we put it out there, it must get a response. And then actually it doesn't. So if 300 people are killed in the Democratic Republic of Congo, no one will care, because the story has not been presented in the right sort of way. And this is an epochal challenge for news. How do we cope with an age in which an audience is distracted and won't simply respond to bits of information just because they are shocking and important? How do you make the important popular? Popularization is one of the most important skills that news journalists could nowadays possess. Yet oddly, especially in serious newspapers, it's not taken that seriously as a topic. One of the things I said, there's lots of news. There's actually not that much news. The thing about the news, though, is that it refuses to remind you of a fundamental fact, which is that there are only really a few stories in the world. There are really 32 news stories, and they just keep going round and round. They're archetypes. The news doesn't like telling you about archetypes. It only likes to tell you about so-called original events. What we should try and do as consumers of the news is to look out for them. So the next time a powerful man sleeps with someone and their career is ruined, we'll realize, okay, well, that's like the other one. And that's like an eternal theme of mankind. Let me give you one archetype, for example. This chap is doing something, and it's exactly the same story as this person, which is exactly the same story as these people. Extraordinary people doing ordinary things. A very charming kind of story. It has a huge emotional resonance with people because because we're all afraid of power, and when we see power doing something reassuringly ordinary, like wrestling with a car seat or going shopping at Whole Foods, we are reassured that power is sympathetic to ordinary life. I mentioned the Democratic Republic of Congo, great humanitarian crisis going on there now. The weird thing is we don't care. And the reason is we didn't know they were alive in the first place. You can't care about the death of someone who you didn't know existed previously. So when the news rushes to tell us, 50 people have been killed in Peru, very few people in this room would be able to summon up any images of Peru, or indeed Bolivia, or Paraguay. These are important places with millions of inhabitants. They don't make it onto the news because recently there have been no disasters there. As soon as there's a disaster there, we'll find out about these countries. That's not right. We can't create an empathetic relationship which will stir us when there's a death. And some people say, well, it's just because we're racist. And I don't think we are racist. People say, well, because people have got black skin, and so that's why we don't care about them. Nonsense. It's just that we don't have information. And without information about the steady state of a place, that place's traumas and disasters can't matter to us. There's going to be no emotional connection. So what do we need to do? We need art. And by art, I mean not, fancy paintings. What I mean is a capacity to make a connection with the viewer, a suggestion of information, or information-rich, a way of conveying things that will touch people's hearts. Take photojournalism. Good photojournalism, and indeed, if you go to the newsrooms nowadays, all photo editors will say, oh, no one's paying for good photographs, no one cares about good photographs. What's a good or a bad photograph? A good photograph is one which advances your knowledge of a situation. It doesn't merely corroborate a sense of something having happened. It advances knowledge. So a lot of pictures out there are dead pictures. They're simply pictures of corroboration. Some will say, François Hollande went to Britain, and then there's a picture of François Hollande in Britain. That picture is not telling you anything about him, about his relationship with Britain, about what he's doing. But the good pictures are themselves agents of knowledge. Here's a wonderful picture by an acclaimed photographer called Stephanie Sinclair, and this is of child marriage in Yemen. You look at this picture, the reason why this picture is so great is that it tells us lots of things that we never knew. For example, it's not really children who are getting married, it's little old ladies. By the time you've been married off to one of these guys, you age 40 years. And also, oddly, these guys don't look like men. They look like children. They don't know what they're doing either. So it's odd, it's poignant. But that picture is one that you can look at for a long time and get rich information. So few of these pictures, because we've downgraded our sense of photography as an information-bearing medium. Think of the president. Obama, we've seen him so many times in these pictures. This is a dead picture. It's not telling you anything. There is no information in this picture. There's a wonderful White House photographer called Pete Souza who Obama met when he was a young senator and made friends with him, and he's now in the White House, and he puts pictures up for free on the White House blog. Now, we know lots about Obama. We know lots of things that he can fake. He fakes things to get elected. We didn't quite know that he could fake things